At 1 in the afternoon, the helicopters returned. But that time, they did not come only to look around. Instead, they started bombarding the houses and shooting.
On Thursday, El Faro English interviewed Engracia Mendoza, a leader of Guatemala's Maya Ixil community, in her home in Chajul, Quiché. She's a survivor of the Ixil genocide, as well as a witness in the soon-to-be-concluded trial of retired General Benedicto Lucas García, which is where today's episode of Central American Minutes begins.
In Nicaragua, the house arrest of Daniel Ortega's brother
relates more to El Salvador and Honduras than to Guatemala. In the case of Guatemala,
they say globalism comes to die at CPAC, but in El Salvador, it's already dead.
Central America in Minutes on El Faro English.
I'm Roman Gressier, the editor of El Faro English, and this is our second weekly dispatch on key stories from Central America. It's Friday, November 1st, which in Guatemala is known as El Día de Todos los Santos, or All Saints' Day, an annual memorial of the dead. We're recording in Nevaj, one of the 3 municipalities that make up the Maya Ixil region. This is the territory where Benedicto Lucas García, the former Minister of Defense and, later, head of the General Staff of the Guatemalan Army during the dictatorship of his brother Romeo, now stands accused of carrying out genocide against the Ixil people at the turn of the 1980s. The Ixil are one of 5 Maya peoples identified in 1999 by the Commission for Historical Clarification as being victims of genocide at the hands of the military during the internal armed conflict, which lasted from 1960 to 1996. This is the second genocide trial in Guatemala, following that of former dictator Efraín Ríos Montt, who was convicted in 2013, though the ruling was overturned 11 days later on a procedural technicality. Ríos Montt died in 2018. After more than 90 hearings, the Benedicto Lucas trial is in the final stretch. In the debate phase, documentary evidence, experts, and witnesses were presented. In court, prosecutors submitted evidence of 34 massacres, at least 800 victims and 90 forced disappearances, 190 deaths during the forced displacement due to bombing, hunger, thirst, or curable diseases, and the complete destruction of 32 villages. The Public Prosecutor's Office told El Faro English that they systematized around 500 complaints for this specific case. My colleague Juliana Ramazzini, the new reporter for El Faro English, and I have attended hearings in this trial.
This case has received far less media and public attention in Guatemala. The courtroom is almost empty and has become somewhat impersonal because the defendant is not physically present. Benedicto Lucas has excused himself for medical reasons and is in the military hospital. He can only be seen through a screen. Lucas is not the only man accused in this case. Manuel Callejas y Callejas, the former intelligence director, and Cesar Octavio Noguera Argueta, head of military operations, were also indicted. But the former was declared unfit to stand trial and the latter died in 2020. Despite months of hearings, the defense has tried to further delay sentencing, but the judge has warned that the trial must end in the first week of November. When El Faro repeatedly asked Lucas through his defense team for an interview, they did not respond. One key witness, U.S. photojournalist Robert Nicholsberg, was invited to ride in a helicopter with Benedicto Lucas during a military operation in the Ixil region. He testified in court that he witnessed the general give the order to fire on unarmed civilians. Here is audio of the hearing recorded by courtroom watcher Verdad y Justicia.
There were civilians on the ground, and the general explained that because the civilians were running away, they must be part of the guerrilla militant network, and that's why they were fired upon.
Engracia Reina Mendoza Caba, who today is one of the leaders of the indigenous Ixil Mayor's Office of Chajul, barely survived this military campaign. From February 16th to 20th, 1982, when she was 9 years old, her father and 4 of her 8 siblings were killed by the Guatemalan army in Chulutze, a village near her native Chajul. She's one of dozens of witnesses to offer testimony in the Benedicto Lucas trial. She spoke to El Faro in the local Chajul variant of the Ixil language through a Spanish language interpreter.
Something very important that Mrs. Engracia does not forget is when her sister told her, "Go. Leave. I already know I will die here. I sense it. I know there is no way out. You have your life ahead of you. Go. And one day, come back for my bones, for my body. But go, and return one day for me."
Next, we turn to Guatemala City. On Monday, the exiled Nicaraguan digital outlet Confidencial published a report on the 135 political prisoners who were banished to Guatemala and stripped of their citizenship and assets in Nicaragua by the Ortega regime, the second such mass expulsion in the past 2 years. According to Confidencial, after the first month, the Guatemalan government cut back the living stipend offered to the refugees as they await the adjustment of the refugee status. Some of the former political prisoners who are ill are no longer receiving specialized medical attention. In a September 5th press conference, the Arévalo administration and U.S. State Department promised this group of refugees quick resettlement aid in a country of their choosing, and touted their reception in Guatemala as a joint achievement for democracy in the region. This is what Guatemalan Foreign Minister Carlos Ramiro Martinez said at the September press conference in response to a question from El Faro English, with audio recorded by Prensa Libre, on Guatemalan aid to the group.
There is a commitment from both the United States and Guatemala, as well as other countries who could eventually participate in this process, to act as quickly as possible. It's clear to us that we need to resolve this issue so that these people can move on to a new phase of their lives.
Confidencial reported that former prisoner of conscience Marcos Sanchez, who suffered 2 severe strokes in prison, was told by the United States over the phone that he had been denied, quote, any type of aid and entry into the country, without further explanation. As he continues to wait in Guatemala, Sanchez now hopes to obtain citizenship from Spain, where the government has offered it to the hundreds of Nicaraguans stripped of their nationality since February 2023. In San Salvador, our colleagues Ramiro Guevara and Omnian report on the firing of Idalia Zúniga, a leading public school unionist, after she participated in a demonstration on Saturday, October 19th, of hundreds of doctors and teachers, the largest public protest in El Salvador since 2021. The demonstrators denounced a total of $121 million of proposed budget cuts in 2025 to public health and education. Education Minister José Mauricio Pineda and President Nayib Bukele's Chief of Cabinet, Carolina Recinos, summoned Zúñiga to a meeting and asked for the public announcements of the protest to be withdrawn. She was also asked to sign a document to call off the march in exchange for the establishment of a dialogue. She declined, and on Monday she learned that she had been fired. In an interview before the protest, Zúñiga said this to El Faro about the proposed budget slashing.
Next year, if this continues and we allow this to be approved, there will be much precarity in the educational system. For a school of 1,000 students, they give us $3,000 to operate for the whole year. Last year, the educational community had to organize itself in order to get by. As director of my school, I feel that we are administering poverty.
For the last 3 years, the Bukele administration has installed police checkpoints choking off access to San Salvador for potential protesters. Guevara and Omnian write that, quote, a march of 2,000 people is no small feat in a country that has spent 2 years and 7 months with constitutional guarantees suspended.
Thanks for listening to Central American Minutes. Today's episode was written by Roman Gracier and me, Juliana Ramazzini, with production and original soundtrack by Omnian. For more for reporting on Central America, visit our front page at elfaro.net/en and subscribe to our newsletter. See you next week. Adios.